Hey folks, Gary here. Happy Thursday morning to you. In fact, happy very early Thursday morning to you. That's what happens sometimes when you can't sleep. That happens. Sometimes you just can't shut off your mind and you have a hard time sleeping. So what do? Well, you get up and you make a video. Actually, you you just get work done. So hopefully this video makes sense. I think it probably will, but what a great day to be alive anyways. I hope your Thursday's starting off fantastic, and every day we walk with God is a great day. So we've been talking about barrenness and God producing greatness out of barrenness, producing life out of barrenness. And we talked about Sarah and Abraham. Now here's the thing about Sarah and Abraham. Like, they seem to be shocked that God's going to do this. Like we read that passage yesterday where Sarah laughed, and yet God gave them Isaac, and that was amazing. Abraham would have been 100 years old, and Sarah well into her 90s, and yet God fulfilled the promise that He promised so long ago. Now you could understand Sarah laughing about this because she probably had given up on this promise. She probably didn't think it was actually going to happen. If we go back to when Abraham was first promised this, 15, I believe, Abraham was, he's like, I don't have an heir. I need an heir. Like, I want a son. And God promises that He's going to have a son. He's going to have a son through Sarah. But it hasn't happened yet. At that point in time, Abraham's in his mid-80s, and Sarah's probably in her early mid-70s, and it hasn't happened yet, so they're probably thinking it's probably not going to happen. And so Sarah comes up with her own plan of how they're going to solve this. And of course, Abraham goes along with it. It's not just all on Sarah. And so she gives Abraham her servant. She has a servant, and she gives her servant to Abraham, so the servant will become a wife of Abraham's as well. And of course, she becomes pregnant, and we have Ishmael who comes on the scene, who is Abraham's son. And so I think they start to believe that all these promises are going to come through Ishmael. All these promises that God made, and he's there. And Abraham loves Ishmael. He really does, because he's his son. But whenever you read in Scripture, when there's two wives, when there's more than one wife, it never works out well. It's always a problem. That should be a hint to us. Do not have more than one wife. Have one, okay? Because you're just asking for lots of trouble in your life. And there was lots of trouble. But here's the thing. Ishmael was not the promise. He was not the promise. And so they may have think that they got around the barrenness. Okay, we got this barrenness, but God gave us a promise. And I think we're going to get around it by doing this. But God's not interested in getting around this. He's not really interested in your creative ways to do that. When He makes a promise, He makes a promise. And so we see in Genesis 17, 15, and 19, God's having a talk with Abraham, and He says this. And God said to Abraham, as for Sarai, your wife, you shall not call her name Sarai, but Sarah. God's made a covenant with Abraham. Abraham's now Abraham, not Abram, as well. That shall be her name. I will bless her, and moreover, I will give you a son by her. I will bless her, and she shall become nations. Kings of peoples shall come from her. Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed, and says, Abraham laughs as well, laughed and said to himself, shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? Shall Sarah, who's 90 years old, bear a child? And Abraham said to God, oh, that Ishmael might live before you. And God says, no, but Sarah your wife shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his offspring after him. God's saying, no, the promise is through Isaac. God's going to bless Ishmael, don't get me wrong, but the promise is through Isaac. So don't short circuit what God's doing. Don't try to make a shortcut. God's promised you something, He's promised you something. Don't force it to happen. Trust what the Lord's doing. Anyways, that's the message for today. Have a fantastic day. I'll catch you tomorrow.